Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight, I am joined by an Audie Award finalist, an AudioFile Earphones Award-winning narrator who has recorded over 300 audiobooks. She excels at narrating suspense thrillers, literary fiction, and romantic comedies. That's right, is your favorite narrator and mine, Karissa Vacker. Carissa, did I pronounce your name right? I forgot to ask that. That was the main thing I wanted to ask before we got started.
Karissa Vacker.
Perfect. And then, so I took that from your bio. Did you win the Audie yet, though, or are you still just a finalist?
I'm still just an Audie finalist, yes, but I have
Uh,
narrated, I think, close to 500 audiobooks now. So that
you'd have to
that's
update your bio there. 500. All right. Well, we're definitely going to have to get more into that. So, and then I know there's a lot more to talk about. I know your time is limited. So thank you for making time to do this. Let's start with so basically what I always find fascinating. So I'm a huge audiobook. I'm a huge, yeah, I'm a huge audiobook fan. And so I really have narrators that I know are like solid narrators that if I see, oh, they're attached to a book, great. Because usually it's like, maybe I'll listen to a sample and then, with whatever else. And so I started doing this mostly, chatting with author friends about just writing and whatever else. But then Eduardo Ballerini, he had narrated one of my books. Actually, I guess two of my books now, and I had just reached out to him because I was like, I think it'd be cool to start narrating narrators because you guys play such a vital role in today's, publishing landscape. I didn't even use the term like unsung heroes because like, audiobooks are so huge now. And it's very fascinating. I think the majority of narrators get into it from just acting. They started out in acting. I think only Hillary Hubbard is like the only one that like was just from this like voiceover work, and then she got into it that way. So let's start with you. Like, I'm assuming it's not every little girl's dream to grow up to be an audiobook narrator, but like, what was the plan initially?
the plan initially was definitely to be a movie star. I
Okay,
planned to
good.
not even, no, I was, I started in theater in high school and really fell in love with saying other people's words. There was something about that I found very freeing. And so I did theater all throughout high school. And then I got into SMU, Southern Methodist University in Dallas. I got into their theater program, studied theater there, loved it even more. And then after that, I moved to Chicago for a few years, did more regional theater. And that's when I started doing some film and TV work. I did a pilot with Beau Bridges, and that was like my springboard to LA. And then nothing happened. Just so many pilots do, it just fizzled. But it was a great experience. And then I was in LA, and I was there, and I was doing film and TV work. And then a good friend was like, "Hey, you should think about doing audiobooks." And I was like, "What?" Because audiobooks were not
What time
super.
of year was, I mean, not what time of year, but like, yeah, like what year was this? Because I feel like, audiobooks, especially with Audible and everything else, have just really boomed as opposed to before, where it was like, if you want to listen to an audiobook, you had to get like the, 15 sleeve CD case of audios or just like, all these cassettes. So like at what year or like, yeah, what time in your life was this?
This was like, I want to say late 2013, maybe 2014. Um, so at that time, I had never listened to an audiobook. So they were happening for sure, but they were not what they are today. And I think I recorded my first book in 2015, and then so I've been doing this now for 10 years. I was very lucky. I got great projects pretty early on, and so I've been
Yeah,
very lucky to
five
do this for
at
decades.
500 in 10 years. So, okay, yeah, we're going to talk more about that. That's an insane amount of or of audiobooks to narrate. But okay, so great. So, do you remember I mean, so obviously, yes, it was suggested to you get into audiobooks. So, um, but like, how does one just get into audiobook work?
Yes, yeah, such a good question. It's so different today. So I often get this question from people now, like, how do I get started? That's a whole, we can talk about that later. But how I got started 10 years ago was this friend introduced me to a producer that she was working with. And Deb Dion, see what it was. She's got Dion Audiobooks in LA. And so I met with her, and I she was offering a class at that time. I got my demo created in this like weekend long class I did. Um, and then she liked my demo and she referred me to someone at Penguin Random House, Dan Musselman, who's no longer there, but man, what a wonderful force this man was. Brought in so many beautiful artists over the years. I've spoken to so many narrators that got their start because of Dan Musselman at Penguin Random House in LA. So I felt very lucky to meet with him. And so I would do a book, it started real slow. I would do maybe one book a month the first year, maybe not even that, maybe one a quarter. Like it
Do,
started quite
do you
slow.
remember your very first book?
Oh oh boy, you based.
Or at the very least, do you remember like the genre of like what type of book it was?
I remember, yeah, it was for sure a YA, young adult book, and I want to say it was a Daughter of Deep Silence. I have to look up to see if that is
No, that's okay. I was just
a
curious.
real book, but I think it was called Daughter of Deep Silence, and that's one that I auditioned for with Dan Musselman, and I was so nervous. I remember sitting in Random House's recording studio, and I had rehearsed the heck out of it, but it was great. So I got that book. Um, yes, so I didn't really start you know, doing this full time probably until 2017 or 18 after I had gone to APAC, which you're probably familiar with, Audiobook Publishers Association Conference, which is associated with the Audies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I met a bunch of people that helped bolster my career.
So initially, I'm assuming this is your studio, right? This isn't just a random room in your house or wherever you're at. So this is so like at for the longest time, I guess I know that I guess especially around COVID, a lot of narrators were basically forced to do the in-home studios. And I know that some people, even with in-home studios, prefer to go to studios. I mean, at what point did you start that transition? And like, do you have a preference in being like in a regular studio from, a Random House or Blackstone or whatever type of studio versus your own?
Yeah, I did start in the studios. And that was awesome. A great way to start because I always had a director and or an engineer. So I didn't have to worry at all about the technical side of things. And I had someone to just make sure that I was always giving my best performance and keep me really focused. So those were two like giant, bonuses I had to start my career with those two things. So it wasn't until 2020, just as you said, that I built my own studio when I had books lined up to record and everything shut down in LA. I had to build a studio in 3 weeks. And I was just reaching out to everybody I knew about how to do this. What do I need, just like equipment wise, software wise? Um, so I did, and I got it up and running in 3 weeks in March of 2020. And then, by the time that I guess it was May or June of that year, I was like, you know what? I can kind of live anywhere. And at that time, my husband and I decided to move to Dallas since I had my own studio and I was pregnant at the time. So we wanted to be closer to family when our son was born. So it really allowed me to like shift my life and in a different place.
So now the majority of all your narrations are in your studio, or like, are there any times where you do end up having to go to, I know, like I remember, well, maybe this was back in the day, but I remember that sometimes, you know, if they really want you to narrate, the publisher will actually like, bring you out to the studio.
Yeah, that was a thing that was offered. Like I remember Brilliance, I think they're in Michigan, had offered that around the same time that everything shut down. So I never ended up going there. But yes, now everything is recorded in this little Studio Bricks booth that you see here. I'm in Dallas, so I don't, nobody's flying me out anywhere to record anything. It's just as easy to do it right here. I loved going in person in the studio just because you really feel that collaborative aspect. And that's really, really satisfying. And I'm also really glad to be recording at home because I have so much more flexibility as far as my schedule goes. And, it used to take me so like extra hours in traffic, obviously, to get from A to B. And now I just pop in here and it's much more efficient, which is super useful when you have a small child. So even
Yeah,
if I work in LA, I think I would opt to record at home as much as possible.
absolutely. So let's talk about then the prep. How much, what type of prep do you do when you are, I guess, approaching a new project? Some of the narrators I've spoken with, they want to read the entire book. Other ones just want to kind of maybe read a couple chapters, get a good sense of it. I don't know, like what have you found works for you? And has that changed over the past decade from that very first YA book? You really practiced or did whatever you had to do for that audition?
Yes, it has changed tremendously. So, yes, as I said, I used to read the book probably twice and rehearse certain, sections that I found more challenging. And I would highlight every single character and, write lists of notes. Now I record a book, sometimes more than that a week, 1 to 2 books a week. So I don't have time to do that anymore. So I would say about maybe even just a year ago. So for 9 years, I've probably been highlighting. And about a year ago, I was like, you know what? I think I can let this go. I wonder what's going to happen if I don't highlight every single character. And lo and behold, I'm fine because I've done this for some time. So now, yes, I generally read the whole book. And I do occasionally highlight characters the first chapter or two, just because I'm such a visual learner, and that really helps me to differentiate who's speaking initially, and then I can kind of run with it. Um, Now, there are certain books, like let's say it's a romance, and especially if I've done it's part of a series and I've done quite a few of them, then I might not just like read every single chapter. I might get more of a sense of the arc of it, and the characters, and then go from there. But I'd say by and large, I do read the whole book just because it does give me a much better sense of the world, the tone, and of course, the characters. I'll also say over time, I have kind of developed a stock of characters that live in my brain. So I know, if the author doesn't really clearly define them for me, if they're not very well fleshed out, then I kind of know, like, okay, well, this is the best friend character and the mom character and the hero, the heroine, what have you. I'll have those to kind of fall back on if if need be.
Yeah, your male characters sound very like male-esque, if that makes sense. Like, was that something that did you have to practice on, or even back when you were acting, you kind of had that? I mean, how many different? Because sometimes these books have a lot of characters, and I know it's got to be difficult to try to distinguish, just even if it's something slight with each different character. Like, how are you able just to kind of juggle that?
Yeah, I did have to practice my male voice quite a bit initially. And it was something I was very intimidated by initially because you don't want to sound like fakey or, it feels kind of ridiculous when I first started doing it. I felt like it did. Um, and then over time, I think you know, I I just got more. I found what worked for me. For example, I often cast characters from TV or movies or from my own life. I'll be like, oh, this is totally my friend from college, whatever. Or this is definitely Leonardo DiCaprio kind of character. And then if for some reason, if I have that visual in my mind, that helps me dip into a different place in my voice. Just the visual. Not like I ever am going to sound like Leonardo DiCaprio, but something about that will help me distinguish. So casting characters is one trick, and also physicality is one trick. So like if I'm doing like a firefighter or some like big burly guy, I'll like try to make my body bigger. I'll like sit up taller in my booth and like move my arms and like create a slightly more masculine physical stance for myself. And that's also a way that I felt like I was able to drop into that male voice a little bit more. It is super fun too to be able to like, because I'm a very feminine woman, but like to be able to put on this like kind of male persona several times every day. It's kind of fun. It's like interesting to explore that other side of myself that under no circumstances ever would I ever do that.
Yeah. Plus, I'm actually listening to A Flicker in the Dark right now, and there are times where you have different male characters within the same scene.
Yeah,
So how, so how, like, is it, I'm assuming it's not easy to try to differentiate two different male characters to make sure that they're sounding consistent throughout the entire book.
for sure. I will say differentiating male characters is probably my Achilles heel as a narrator. That is the thing that is most challenging for me. So sometimes one thing I do, in addition to pitch, like some guys, I'll pitch up a little bit. Um, I will do different things with like my face. Like some guys get to be kind of nasally, and I will just talk up here. But my usually in general the main male character, whoever he ends up being, if he's the bad guy in a thriller or the love interest in a romance or whatever, if he's described in a super masculine way, he usually lives like right here. This is where he lives. And so I know where to put different characters in my body, which I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. But so again, some people will be like nasal. Some guys I'll have like speak with a little bit of a drawl and I'll talk out the side of my mouth a little bit. Accents help too. I know Flicker in the Dark, there's quite a few Southern accents. So I try to play with who has an accent, who doesn't.
Yeah, and on your website it does say that you bring Southern American, British, French, and Irish characters to life. So those accents you feel that you have down, are there any other accents that you feel comfortable doing? Or are there sometimes you might come to a project where it has certain, it calls for certain accents and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle that.
Yeah, so those listed are definitely the ones I'm most comfortable with. If I am approached with a project that has a Scottish or Australian accent, for example, I will probably turn down that project because I initially in my career, if I got a book with a bunch of accents, I would say yes, and I would just go out and learn what I could. Um, but that that is just sometimes I feel like that would take away from my what I do best as a storyteller to be mired in a bunch of different accents. Like if it's one or two accents throughout the book, I can usually really embrace those and have those serve the project well. But I find like, if we're in a book where there's people from seven different countries talking to each other, I am not the narrator for that project because my brain just doesn't like to change sounds that frequently. And so I've learned that about myself over time. So I'm like, okay, if we've got an Irish character throughout, beautiful, wonderful. And he's talking to one or two other people accented, fine. But otherwise, I'm very picky and choosy these days about accented books because I feel like my job is to really tell the story the best I can. So I want to make sure I do that well.
Yeah. Well, what about languages? Are there any languages that you feel fluent in or that you can at least make it passable for an audiobook?
Yeah, I only speak English fluently, but there are often, like I think I just had a book recently with several Italian phrases. So in those instances, I will either, if I happen to know someone who speaks Italian, I will have them record those phrases for me, or sometimes the author will even record those phrases for you if they are fluent in that language in the book. And so I'll try to record it, slow it down, and then do my best approximation of that. And the recording is usually what I do. If I can't find anyone who speaks that language, I my default is Google Translate, but that can be a little iffy. So I really try to get somebody that actually speaks the language. That's always the best for sure.
So you talked a little bit about the prep time. What is a typical like work day? Are you trying to do like just a Monday through Friday, like bank hours, or like are you? I know some narrators will do, 6, sometimes 7 days a week, depending on how many projects they're trying to juggle. I mean, what do you like? How much time do you try to squeeze in? Because obviously you have, you have your child, your mom, so you want to make sure that you are taking care of your child. Like, how much? Yeah, I mean, what is a typical work day for you?
Yeah, I do work mostly mornings to early afternoons is my schedule. So my son is typically in daycare somewhere between 9 and 3, or we have a sitter for that time span. And that's also just when I am at my freshest, when I'm at my best. I find like if I try to record after like 4 p.m., it's not as good. I don't enjoy it as much. I don't think that my performance is as good that time of day. So yeah, I'd say like in the morning before I start, I try to do some type of workout or physical stretching, something physical. I either stretch or weightlift or spin or walk because that will activate my breath also. Like I feel that um narrating, if my rib cage doesn't feel open, like I can't sustain long sentences, and it's just my performance is better if I have warmed up my body physically to sit still and perform, which is a very different skill than performing on stage or on camera when you're using your whole body. Um, so
Yeah,
I'll
do
do
you
that.
like to sit or stand when you're narrating?
I would love to stand actually, but I do sit because I found the one standing desk I tried this with one time created this awful echoey sound.
Mm.
And so I'd have to play with it and reconfigure my setup in here. I'm sure I could figure it out. I just haven't figured it out in several years, 5 years now that I've been recording on my own. But I think it's awesome. Those people that do record standing up, huzzah. But sadly, not me. So I try to be very active all the time that I'm not sitting in here. So yeah, then I'll record like an hour to 90 minutes at a time. And then I try to pop out for like a 10-minute break. And I do that. And I try to record anywhere between an hour finished or like 90 minutes finished a day, finished hours.
Okay, so like yeah, so for people who aren't aware, so you as a narrator, well, actually, most I would say almost all narrators are you only get paid like per finished hour. So if an audiobook is 10 hours long, which I usually equate like every 10,000 words is usually about an hour, give or takes,
Yeah.
depending on if the narrator is a little quicker with how, they talk or a little bit slower. So usually about like a 100,000 word novel might be about 10 hours, give or take. So that's the finished hour. So typically then to get a 10-hour audiobook, how much like studio time are you putting in for that type of work? And I guess that doesn't even really include then pickups, which can you talk real quick about just, like how many pickups would you say you might get on a given project?
That varies widely. There are some 10-hour books that I'll have 6 pickups for, and some I'll have 60. So the pickups are corrections. So anytime that I either transpose words, say the wrong thing, mispronounce something, then after the book is recorded, then they'll come back to me and say, "Hey, you re-record these little sections." So I just fit that in usually at the beginning or end of my workday whenever those pickup sessions come in. And the things that make me have more pickups are like very teeny tiny type, like single spacing, like those things can make my eye definitely skip over things or transpose things. Um, you had another question, well, before that I feel like I didn't finish answering.
I guess,
How long?
oh, in terms of just like, a like to get to a finished hour. Okay, so say you're recording or you get hired to do like 100,000 word novel, about, 10 hours give or take. How much studio time is that? Are we looking at like a week, a little bit more, less?
Yeah, so I try to do, if it's going to be a 10-hour book, I would probably, if I'm recording by myself, I would give myself 7 to 8 days, give or take. Um, if I am recording with a director, I would for sure do that in 4 to 5 days.
Hmm.
So with the director, I tend to be a little bit more focused and efficient, basically. And sometimes, like for Random House, they'll do what's called straight record. So I'm not in here doing punch and roll recording, which is where I stop every time I make a mistake or need to swallow and then have to punch back in where I left off. A straight record, I'm just going when I flub, I pause, pick up at like the beginning of the sentence and continue on recording. So that tends to be more efficient on my end as well. Um, so that's why that is quicker with a director. Yeah, so yeah, I try to do like an hour to like today I did 100 minutes finished, and that took me um 3.5 to 4 hours, I think.
Now, obviously, there are audiobooks that is not just one narrator, it's not just you. There are times where, a lot of, especially I feel like I don't want to say necessarily a trend, but I feel like more and more audiobooks are having these. If it has more than one narrator, especially a lot of psychological suspense, there's always like several different, narrators or at least point of views. Um, in those instances where you might just be like, okay, I'm here on Audible. You did the Young Rich Widows that came out a couple years ago. You were one of four narrators, correct? In that instance, are you reading the entire book or are you just focusing on your chapters?
Generally just on my chapters. There are, like I remember for Young Rich Widows, there's so much crossover in between chapters that there were times that I'd have to I'd get to my chapter and they'd be in the middle of like some climactic scene and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. So then I have to go back and make sure that I am tracking with where the characters have been, what they're up to. So it really, again, that also really depends on the book. Usually when it's a multi-read or a dual record where I'm trading off chapters with another narrator, I more often than not will just read my chapters. But Young Rich Widows was one of those where I think I pretty much read or at least skimmed through the other characters' chapters because it was just necessary to really establish the correct flow of the story.
Yeah. Have you ever done one of those audiobooks? And I don't think that I feel like for a while publishers were kind of pushing it, and personally I'm not a fan, but the one where it might be a narrator, like a male narrator doing whatever else, and then a female character comes in, and then like the female narrator is doing the dialogue where you would, talk, 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 and then, she said the male narrator was, you know what I mean? Like, I forget what that is called, but I'm not personally a fan of that.
That's called a duet,
Okay.
where the female narrator does all the female dialogue in the book. The male narrator does all the male dialogue, but they still trade off um, narration POV chapters. So, like, yeah. So I'd be like, I'd have my chapter, he'd have his chapter, but we're still punching in lines for that female or male dialogue. That's super popular, especially in romance, to do a duet narration. And I kind of like it. I mean, it's nice to really just be able to focus on the female characters. Um, but
Right, but
yeah,
I guess my question is, you're not. So I remember, "Listen to the Lie" was narrated by January Lavoie and Will Dameron. Will had told me that for that specific book, typically, like it was unique in that the studio or the publisher actually brought them both in to do the podcasting, so they were able to kind of like work off each other during those sections. Whereas when you're doing like just bits of dialogue, like they're just like splicing that in later, correct?
correct. Yeah, I think it's probably doesn't give the best performance. I think the best is definitely what Will and January did in person. Um, and that's how all duets used to be recorded. They weren't as popular then. Um, and I think they're probably more, potentially, I would think, more expensive to do that way. But I've also done them over live Zoom calls where we're all recording with our own equipment, but you can hear your other narrator, performing. And so you kind of get to play off of them and have that conversation in real time, which is really fun. But again, that means everybody's got to align their schedules, which can get super complicated. So these days I do a fair amount of duets, and I almost never am in real time with the other narrator. So that is also a little bit of an art in those chapters to be able to look for the correct tags or whatever. It's not just like she sighed or whatever, but what is her mood in this particular scene and sell that without reading out loud the rest of the scene, just picking up those tags. It's a little bit of a skill, but I do it a lot now. So I think I've gotten fairly good at it, hopefully.
Yeah. So, what else was I thinking of? How about, are there pet peeves that you've come across where, I mean, you say it's now been over 500 audiobooks. Um, I mean, I would just say, like, as a listener, there are times where I feel like it's very clear some authors do not actually listen to audiobooks, which I always find crazy at this point because it's such a big market. But where you will have like two characters talking back to each other and there's just like a speech tag on every single line. And it's like sometimes it's like, are they not aware of just how this comes across? And I don't know, like, is there anything that ever like sticks out to you? And you don't have to say if you don't want to, but I don't know if there's anything that like, might be considered a pet peeve where when you get to it, you're like, oh God, because like basically, and I don't know if people are aware of this, like whatever is on the page, you have to say. So even if it's like just, the sentence structure is a mess, like you have to say whatever is there.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about with the too many tags. That's probably one of them, but also there are times when authors will just, I mean, I have had sentences that are like a paragraph long, and there's like a lot of moving parts and, parentheticals in there, and you're just trying to make sense of it. Like those can be tricky. They can be just hard sometimes to make sense of. So I think not that every sentence needs to be short, super concise and short, but I think just like an awareness of that. And there's some authors who that's like just their style is they like write really long, sometimes a little bit rambly sentences or certain characters. So that's like, I don't know if that's a pet peeve, but that's a little thing that I'm like, okay, when I see that.
Well,
What
do you have
else?
any like advice for authors who,
Mhm.
just because again, I think that some authors do understand just the audiobook market, and that when they're writing, they kind of keep that in mind, like, well, how is this also going to? Because I remember, I don't know, years ago, I was thinking about doing a project, and I realized I wanted to try something different, but I was like, but on the page it would work, but as an audiobook it would not because, certain things. So like, I don't know, is there any like advice you would have just any writers out there?
For sure, read your stuff out loud. And I know it takes a lot of time you're not going to read your whole book out loud probably, but like every once in a while, I'd say, you know, a page a day or something, whatever your pages are that you're writing that day, uh, read one out loud, like see how it flows and do that every now and again. And I think some people would probably be pretty surprised that like, oh, this is a little clunkier than it needs to be, or maybe this sentence can be tightened up for audio. Another thing is just, I mean, one thing that I think you can do to really help your audiobook stand out or help your book translate to audio is be super, super clear in your characters, which is really honestly true if there's audio component or not. But that is one of my favorite things that I come across when an author has just created full, dynamic, very specific characters. I love performing those. That is always a treat for me. Um, so that's definitely one of my favorite things. And I think also just not, I guess a pet peeve would be something that is looks like it's said one way, but like the author wants it pronounced in a way that it is, you know, like what was it? I forgot a word I had recently was like it looked like Pembroke, but they wanted Pembroke. And
Hmm.
so it's just something like that, where it's like, if you want me to say it, make it spelled like it's said.
Yeah, but I also kind of feel, I mean, depending on the circumstances, I kind of feel like that's also, on the producer. Because as I know for some projects I've gotten that spreadsheet where they'll have like certain breakdown of words and they want me to review to make sure that these are how these are supposed to be pronounced. And I guess, maybe not every publisher or author is able to kind of, have that prep in place for the narrator. So did you, okay, so you've been doing this now a decade and 500 audiobooks. Clearly you're doing something right because you keep on getting work and you've won awards. um was there a certain book or a certain period where you realized where just things were taking off, where maybe you kind of felt like, okay, this is definitely something, I can go from the part-time to making it full, or that, maybe you were even just like getting emails from listeners who were like, oh, I listened to this audiobook and I really liked your performance.
Yeah, I would say I felt like things were really building and there was great momentum around like 2018, 2019. So at that time I was still in LA and I was an on-camera actor as well. And I remember the kind of switch came for me when I realized like that I didn't want to go on auditions for other acting jobs anymore. When I was feeling so fulfilled creatively by my audiobook work, and I had enough audiobook work that it was supporting me financially, and yeah, I just felt like, no, I don't really want to put my energy there anymore. I feel completely satisfied where I am here. So that was about 2019. But I'd say I definitely felt a shift in the kinds of projects I got, the consistency of the projects I got as well, around like maybe 2021, shortly after I moved back to Texas. Uh, I just, yeah, I think I started to get, as you said, more messages from listeners, um, and just a little bit more, what's the word? I just felt more solid in my footing in the industry there, and I got more high quality projects for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking right now at your IMDb page, which I don't know when the last time was you looked at your IMDb page,
I'm
but
terrified of it there.
do
Oh
you
no.
so you were on an episode of How I Met Your Mother.
Oh yes, yes, I
How did that
was.
come about?
That was super fun. It was just, that was the time in my life when I was doing TV shows and auditioning for stuff all the time. I think I auditioned for How I Met Your Mother 10 times before I finally got an episode. So I was in there all the time. And when I finally got that episode, I was so, so excited. It was a great day. It was awesome. My scene was with Josh Radner, I think is his name, the guy that
Okay, so
was
you were
Ted.
like a love interest of Ted's?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
And it was just so fun, man. They for such a popular show, obviously, you run into all kinds of stuff on set, but that was clearly like a happy set. I felt like people were very kind and I had a blast. So fun.
So it looks like here the last thing that you were in was back in 2020. I mean, is that something that you would want to, are you just not pursuing it at all? Or like, are there times where if, I mean, do you still have like a TV film agent? You know what I mean? Like if stuff like work came in, like, are you interested in doing that or just audiobook right now?
Yeah, not really. So I really did kind of fall out of love with that side of acting around 2020. Um, because it was great. I just really I gave it my all for a really long time, and then I just feel like I kind of just ran out of steam with it, and it just didn't hold the same interest, passion, excitement for me that it had in years prior, whereas this did. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna let it go. And also the other truth is that I my son was born early in 2021. So when I became a mom, the amount of time I had to do extra stuff, dwindled precipitously.
Yeah.
So that's the other truth is like I am more interested in, doing this work where I'm creatively fulfilled and I can pay my bills and then I get to be with my family. And I feel like on camera acting never really quite gave me that same ability to have that balance. It was very
Yeah.
feast or famine.
But real quick, it looks like you were in an episode of Days of Our Lives.
Yeah.
And then also 902, what I guess the 90210, I guess, reboot. Do you remember what your character? I guess you didn't really have a name, but do you remember what your character was? At least IMDb has it listed as something.
Oh my God. That one was one of my very first on camera jobs, the 90210. And that was awesome because I like grew up watching 90210. So I was having a really insane experience like being on the show. And I think it was Tori Spelling was in the van with me driving to set. And I was just like wowed by the whole thing. So I think I was like Hip Girl or something. Is that what it says there? Does it say Hip
Hipster
Girl?
number one.
Hipster number one. Yes. I remember we
Pretty
were on
good.
Rodeo Drive and I think we'd be shopping or something. I don't remember my lines, but that, yeah, again, that was my very first LA on camera experiences. And the whole thing was just very fun for my like 10-year-old self to
Absolutely.
like have that experience.
And I don't know if you knew this, but you do have one trivia thing on your IMDb page. It's a
Is
weird
it
one.
is it Vacker means beautiful in Swedish?
Yes.
Yes, I've
Which I
seen
guess
that
is
a few
which I
times.
guess is true. I guess it's a trivia, but it's like, well, usually the trivia is about, anyway. But anyway, all right, well, let's move on here. So, our time is getting limited. Can you talk about, I guess you have a podcast? Can you talk a little bit about the Sleepwave podcast?
Absolutely. So, I have been doing this podcast. It's produced by this company, Sleepiest, since 2021. So, Sleepwave is like a sleep meditation podcast. We also do some sleep stories, um, and it's really this is a super satisfying part of my work that I really value because I hear from people, at least once a week that they're sleeping better, they're feeling better, and that it's really impacted their life in a positive way. And I feel like people either find me through the podcast or through audiobooks, and it's really fun when there's crossover. So people will be like, "Oh, I already find your voice comforting," or "You're usually with me in the day as I'm listening to my audiobooks, and then at night I like to go to sleep to your voice." So that's kind of an honor to get to be with people throughout their day. Um, but yeah, so I have always been very passionate about meditation and yoga. When I was in LA, I did yoga for like 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. It was a delightful time in my life. And so I really like helping people to like live more calm, grounded lives. It's something that I feel like I need help with. And so I like to get better at myself while also sharing it with others.
Yeah. And then, so you said it was a year ago, I guess in the green room we talked briefly. I mean, things were going really well, and then I guess you got diagnosed with cancer, correct?
Yes. So yeah, I guess I was diagnosed November 1st, 2023. But all of my treatment and everything, of course, took place in 2024. And it was really just early this year in 25 that I started to feel kind of more normal. There's still things that you have got to deal with. But yeah, so I had breast cancer and um, had a double mastectomy and I had chemo, no radiation. And I'm also on hormone therapy to help prevent the recurrence of cancer. So it has definitely been a journey and it has reframed everything for me, as you might expect. I try to be very conscious now about how stressed I let myself get about things that I used to be really stressed out about. And I was like, you know what? That doesn't need my energy. I don't need to put that much on this. So that's been a really big change. It's also changed how I work. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't take on a bunch of accented projects that have 15 accents because that's going to stress me out. So I'm going to choose to not spend my energy there. Or maybe I used to record 2 to 3 finished hours a day. Now I record 1.5 finished hours a day, making sure that I have enough time to move my body, be with my family. So it's just kind of shifted all of those things for me to have hopefully a more holistic lifestyle. It's more balanced. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, my laptop is the fan is going crazy on this. I'm going to talk a little bit more into the mic, so hopefully it doesn't pick it up. So during that period, I mean, were you taking, obviously, I'm assuming you were taking time off work. I mean, was there a delay? Like, I guess, because you typically have to line up projects several months in advance. I mean, can you talk a little bit about just because that, did you have to then, I guess, give up work at that period where you had like these projects that were already kind of, like how, like right now, like how far out do you have projects lined up typically?
Um, right now I'm pretty solidly booked into February next year, so that's what 6 months in advance, and maybe I've got a few scattered past that. But so yes, so when I was diagnosed, I did have to, and I was going to have surgery first. I did have to cancel a few projects, and then I thought I'd be okay 2 weeks after surgery to start recording. And I learned, unfortunately, that was not the case. I was not well enough um, to keep recording, so I had to like last minute cancel some projects after my surgery, which I felt terrible about because again, people do book me quite far in advance, but of course, everyone was very understanding that I had to do a last minute cancel. So I think I took 4 weeks off of recording after surgery. And then I also had to cancel the work I had lined up every week. I had chemo. So I had 4 rounds of chemo. They were spaced 3 weeks apart. So each week of chemo, I think I got it on Monday. And the rest of that week I would clear because, you feel pretty crappy on chemo. So I just gave myself that week every 3 weeks to kind of be wherever I was at. And then I would continue to work those 2 weeks in between chemo. And I was glad I did that too, because it gave me a sense of normalcy to like stay connected with my life and my work. Um, and then I was really recording less right after when I was done with chemo to kind of just, I was surprised how much my energy, I shouldn't have been surprised, I guess, but my energy was quite depleted, of course. So I gave myself longer windows to finish projects. But yeah, I had to cancel a lot to answer your question directly. And that was tough, but everyone was very understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so you're booked well, so you have work already scheduled out through February of next year, which is amazing. Are there still like, are you able to still fit in projects? Like if, a publisher came to you and said, we would really like you to at least audition. I mean, how many, I guess, what's the ratio right now where you are still doing auditions where you're, for people who aren't aware, you're doing like a page or two or maybe a chapter of a potential project that they want to hire you for versus like they will just come to you and say, hey, we would like you to do this project.
Yeah. I do hold certain weeks in my calendar in case like dream projects come in every once in a while. Most of those spaces are pretty full, but there if something fantastic comes in that I just absolutely want to squeeze in, I can sometimes, you know, make other days fuller. I can condense the amount of time I had scheduled for something to fit in something else. But again, as I just mentioned, I try to be careful about doing that because I'm trying to like maintain my own energy in a way. And also, again, I think I give a better performance if I'm not just like balls to the wall recording in here for 7 hours a day. So, yes and no. So I can sometimes squeeze things in, but I have to balance that with my own energy. Um, and so I try to leave like when I'm starting to schedule 2026. So in my calendar, I have usually a week saved out of every month, and I like keep it on green in my calendar. And that just I keep those buffers for the more last minute projects that come in. So I don't, book up my entire year because certain publishers will schedule me 4 weeks out instead of 4 months out. And then, yes, I do still have to audition occasionally. I just did an audition today. So certain producers will want to give the author options. But I would say 90% of my work is just an offer, which is great. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. So like, well, then are you at a place now where you can be very picky and then in what projects? I mean, are you turning down work on a regular basis from like, people like, producers reaching out to you about certain books? And if so, Are there certain titles or certain books that like speak to you more where you're more inclined to want to do those versus other type of projects?
Yes, I do. I recognize I'm very blessed to say that yes, I have an abundance of work and I do sometimes have to turn stuff down. I think I turned two or three projects down this week, um, which is hard. At least two of them I was really wanting to do, but time is time. Um, and then what is going to make me want to make extra time for something? Probably if I've worked with that particular author before and know that I love their writing, um, or that, you know, I'm very lucky to get to do not series of books, but an author will find me, they'll like me, and they'll continue to hire me for that book, even through a producer like Random House or Macmillan or whatever. And so when they come to me and say, "Hey, we have another one of like Stacey Willingham's books, for example," so you're reading Flicker in the Dark, and I've done all of her books now, or Kate Alice Marshall, I've done all of her books. So if somebody like they've got a new book, I'm going to try to make time for that because I know I love their writing. I know that, the chemistry is there between their words and what I bring to it. And so, yeah, that's going to make me want to do that for sure.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but are there any books that you, out of the 500 plus that you've done, that maybe have stayed with you? Not necessarily because you like, you again, I don't, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but like, I don't want to make it seem like you're, having favorites, but I'm sure like, there might be a project that might just stick out to you for one reason or another. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, A Flicker in the Dark, which you're reading now, is one of my favorite projects. I just remember being so surprised by the ending. And when you read a lot of thrillers for a living, so you get pretty good at like picking out who's the bad guy. And I couldn't pick it out in that book as I was prepping it. And I just loved it so much. And then another book that stands out is called Shark Heart by Emily Haybeck. And she's actually was a friend from LA. And then when I was asked to read her book, I was like, is it the same Emily? We were not close friends, we were acquaintances. But anyway, I had no idea she was an author. She was a few years younger than me, at SMU. And anyway, I was like, I read her book and I was just simply floored. It was one of the most beautiful books I have ever read in my life. So I still recommend Shark Heart to everyone. I think I recorded that in like 22 or 23. And yes, Shark Heart, gorgeous. Read it.
And then what type of genre? I mean, do you like I mean, do you have a preferred genre? Obviously, you do the romantic comedies, you do thriller, mystery, some literary. Like, if you had to pick one, is there
Mm.
one that you would just really want to kind of move forward with?
Oh, wow. One is tough.
And you don't have to answer it. It was just
And
something
Robert,
that like came to mind.
let me tell you what, I feel I really like the combo that I've got going on because like I'll do a romantic comedy and I get to, play with timing and humor, obviously, and then the swoony aspects of romance. And then the next week I'll do a thriller and I get to be in the world that's kind of gritty and kind of dark and kind of more complicated in different ways. And I really like that. Like that's fun. It keeps me really engaged and it keeps everything feeling fresh. And I think if I only did one genre, it would be harder to keep it fresh.
Yeah, no, I mean that totally makes sense. In our time remaining, did you what are your thoughts on like some people will do like they'll speed up the narration of an audiobook. Like on Audible, they'll do like 1.5 or like 2.0. Like I don't know, like for podcasts, I'll kind of do that sometimes because it's just like podcasts, people are talking back and forth. Like
Sure.
sometimes with audiobooks, I kind of feel like, especially if it's a really great narrator, they have a really good rhythm. Um, Sometimes I will admit, depending on the book, I might just speed it up because it's like I want to finish the audiobook, but like it's nothing against the narrator, but it's I don't know, like do you have any thoughts at all about, like is that insulting when you might, hear that somebody like is listening to an audiobook you narrated at like a 1.5, 2 points, oh type speed?
Yeah. I mean, I think there definitely is a part of me that's like, really? Like I get just teeniest, tiniest little little bit offended because I do try to like create pacing that serves the story. And the other thing I know is true is that, we all absorb information differently, and that there are some minds that like listening faster helps them get that information. Like they're just cognitively process it better. And so, we're all different in that aspect. And so I say like do what works for you. I'm just glad you're listening. But yeah, I think you're going to get the most intentional, fullest experience of the story if you listen at regular speed. That's my
Yeah,
opinion.
because and I've had this conversation before with previous narrators where it's like you guys, yes, you're reading the book, but you're not just reading the book, you're performing it in a way. So it's like it's well, I should say good narrators are performing it in a way. So whereas opposed to like, and then that's why of course there's the huge, controversy right now, and we don't want to get I don't want to even get into it, but like there's a AI narrations out there, which it's not great, but it's like, yeah, something is missed in that, where it's like somebody like you who, has done 500 plus books, there's, I don't know, like you bring, I guess there's more heart and soul to a book that is done by an actual narrator who knows what they're doing versus, just somebody else just, reading it willy-nilly or just, having AI do it.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I think you miss out on the characters, and like so much I think of what makes great storytelling is actually in the breath. It's not even in it is in delivering the lines, but it's in the the moments where like somebody is falling in love, or they're afraid for their life, or they're in the middle of a fight. It's in those moments that I feel like the performance really shines through, and if you're speeding through those, you're probably going to miss them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, we are coming up on the hour. So, Carissa, thank you so much for making time. Before you go, is there any upcoming project or any recent books that you want to give a shout out to? Maybe not even something that you've done. I don't know. Is there anything that you have enjoyed that you want to tell people about?
Yeah, so Stacey Willingham has a new book called Forget Me Not coming out in August, I think, which is really fun. I also just finished prepping. I start recording it on Friday this week, a book called Fun at Parties, which was a delight. That's more of a rom-com, and it is excellently written. So I'm very excited to record that this and next week. Uh, yeah, but otherwise you can just search my Audible for new releases.
And then, so it's over 500. Have you been keeping count? Like, do you have an ongoing list or like a spreadsheet, or is just at this point you just know it's over 500?
Yeah, it's like it's mostly on Audible is the the list. They have the number up top, and then I also have a pseudonym that I do some romance under. So between that and my own name combined, huzzah, we get
That's
500-ish.
right, pseudonyms. I know some other audiobooks. We didn't have time to get into that, but that's fine. So again, we're up at the hour. Carissa, thank you so much for hanging out. Everyone go check out all the books that she's narrated. Yeah, so Flicker in the Dark is really great. And yeah, we'll see everybody next time. Thanks.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks.